Most brides carry flowers down the aisle. My sister carried a manila folder that could destroy the groom standing at the altar. While 200 guests waited for the vows at a $100,000 wedding, the FBI was already hidden in the back room preparing the handcuffs. Her fiancé thought he was marrying into a trailer park family he could scam for millions. What he did know. My sister had been wearing a wire for weeks, and every smug insult, fake LLC, and corrupt land deal had led to this exact moment. In less than 30 minutes, this billionaire groom won't be leaving for a honeymoon. He'll be escorted to a federal holding cell. And the best part? The people he called trash are the ones who orchestrated the most satisfying altar ambush you'll ever see. You are watching Real Reddit Revenge, and today we're diving into a story where the elite met their match, and a legal genius protected her family from the ultimate betrayal. My name is Maya Avery. I'm 32 years old, a practicing attorney, and I don't forgive easily. The specific moment the clock started ticking on my revenge was at a high-end engagement party in a mansion. My sister's fiancé, a trust fund shark named Colton Sterling, decided to whisper to his best man that my mother looked like total trailer park garbage. We were standing in the foyer of the Sterling estate, a place with more marble than a museum and a crystal chandelier that probably cost more than my first home. My mother stood there in her favorite denim jacket, which she'd spent an hour ironing, looking like the hardworking woman she is. Colton was wearing a $400 designer polo and a smirk that made my skin crawl. He thought he was being sneaky, whispering behind a gold leaf screen by the bar. He was dead wrong. My mother is the most resilient human being I have ever encountered. She raised 2 girls alone on a 47-acre homestead in the rugged hills of Berks County, Pennsylvania. After my father passed away suddenly from a massive heart attack back in 2014, she held that farm together through a brutal winter where she survived on nothing but canned vegetables and her own sheer willpower. On that Saturday in June, the man my sister was supposed to marry uttered 14 words that sealed his fate. What I spent the next 6 months doing, and the absolute explosion that happened at the altar, is something the local newspapers are still trying to piece together. But the only person who knew the full scope of the trap I was setting was my mother. And honestly, even she didn't know the darkest parts of the plan. Welcome back to Real Reddit Revenge. This is where we break down the slow burn, deeply satisfying stories of justice. The kind of stories where good, honest people finally stop playing nice and start using the truth as a weapon. If you love seeing arrogant people get exactly what's coming to them, hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, and drop a comment letting me know what state you're watching from. I read every single one. Now, back to that night at the mansion. I'd picked Mom up from the farmhouse at 4 o'clock sharp. The dinner wasn't until 6, but the drive over to the wealthy side of Chester County always took about 45 minutes. She stepped out onto the porch looking nervous, wearing that iron denim jacket over the same navy silk blouse she wore to my law school graduation years ago. Her silver-streaked hair was pinned back neatly, and Dad's wedding band hung from a delicate gold chain around her neck. "Do I look out of place, Maya?" she asked, smoothing her skirt. "You look like the strongest woman in the room," I told her. She gave me a small smile and climbed into my Ford Escape. The sun was dipping low over the horizon, and the rolling fields along Route 422 were that vibrant, deep June green that makes you forget how harsh the winter can be. We drove in silence. Mom and I have always shared a quiet understanding. What she didn't know, however, was that I had spent the last half year pulling every title record and deed associated with the Sterling family. I had already flagged 3 suspicious shell LLCs that all shared the same P.O. box in Reading, the same one used by Colton's father's firm, Sterling Development Group. I had a thick manila folder tucked away in the trunk of my car. It wasn't for the dinner party, it was for the aftermath. I'd been suspicious of Colton from the very first day my sister, Chloe, brought him home for Thanksgiving. He had asked my mother 4 very specific, very technical questions about the acreage, the access roads on the north pasture, and whether the land had ever been surveyed for major utility lines. He'd smiled the whole time, calling her Mrs. Avery with a fake politeness that didn't reach his eyes. My mom thought he was just being interested in her life. I knew better. He wasn't being friendly. He was conducting a secret audit. See, I've been an agricultural land use attorney for nearly a decade. I run a solo practice where I represent dairy farmers and small-time landowners fighting against big developers and eminent domain. I've seen enough dirty land deals to know exactly what a fishing question sounds like. I never told Chloe my suspicions because she was head over heels. Chloe is 27 and had spent her entire 20s working as a paralegal in my office, grinding to pay off student loans and dating guys who were usually looking for a handout. Colton Sterling looked like her, happily ever after. By the time we pulled into the Sterling's driveway, my heart was hammering against my ribs. The drive curved for a quarter-mile through perfectly manicured oak trees. A valet in a tuxedo vest took my keys as we stepped out. The circular driveway was already packed with luxury SUVs, Audis, and a vintage Mercedes that looked like it belonged to royalty. Inside, the house felt cold despite the crowd. The foyer opened into a massive great room with 20-foot ceilings and a staircase that spiraled like a piece of expensive silk. Rosalind Sterling, the matriarch, stood near the entrance, air-kissing women draped in pearls. "Eliza," she said, taking my mother's hands with a forced grin. "What a charming jacket, so incredibly practical for the outdoors." "Thank you," Mom replied, her voice steady. She didn't flinch. She has never taken the bait in her entire life. Then came the father, Whitfield Sterling Sr. He was 62, with perfectly groomed silver hair and a navy blazer featuring gold-plated buttons. His handshake was aggressively firm, the kind of handshake men use when they want to assert dominance. His eyes dropped to my mother's hands and lingered there just a fraction too long. My mom's hands are calloused. Her palms are wide and strong from 30 years of tapping maple trees and hauling wood. "Mrs. Avery," he said smoothly, "we've been quite eager to finally meet the woman behind the land." "Likewise," Mom said simply. Just then, Chloe appeared at the top of the stairs in a champagne-colored cocktail dress. She looked stunning, but the second she started walking down, I saw it. It was the tiniest flicker of hesitation, a shadow of doubt behind her eyes that only a sister would notice. It was like seeing a candle flame shiver in a drafty room. I filed that look away in my mental evidence folder. I excused myself to find the powder room but took the long way back, wandering past a wall of framed family achievements. One photo stopped me dead in my tracks. It was Whitfield Sr. shaking hands with a man in a flannel shirt in front of the county courthouse. The plaque underneath read, "With County Commissioner Earl Mallister, August 2023. Earl Mallister was the very same commissioner who sat on the board for every land use permit in our district. I knew his name because I'd fought him in 12 different client files over the last 3 years. This wasn't just a social circle, it was a conspiracy. By the time I found my mother again, I had 3 major red flags burned into my brain. That photograph, the way Whitfield looked at my mother's working hands, and the fear in my sister's eyes. Cocktails were being served on the back terrace. Servers were weaving through the crowd with trays of expensive champagne and tiny appetizers. Mom held a plain glass of seltzer water. She never drinks in the homes of strangers. I told her I'd be right back and slipped inside to use the restroom again. But really, I was hunting for more info. The main bathroom was occupied, so I cut through the private den toward the kitchen. There was a large Japanese folding screen near a wet bar, and as I approached, I heard voices on the other side. It was Colton and his best man, a guy named Brad. Colton was holding a glass of expensive bourbon, his tie loosened, his voice sounding thick and arrogant. "Seriously, man," Colton scoffed. "Her mother looks like she just crawled out of a trailer park. I'm half expecting her to start handing out grocery coupons at dinner." Brad let out a jagged laugh. "Chloe's lucky she got a degree before the country caught up to her." Colton took a slow sip of his drink. "Yeah, well, just 12 more months." I went completely still, not frozen with hurt, still like a predator. There's a massive difference. 12 more months. Chloe had met Colton 8 months ago. The wedding was in 6. That put the 12-month window right at the end of the year. Window for what? I backed away silently, making sure they didn't see me. I looped through the formal dining room and stepped out onto the terrace from the far side. I found Mom standing by a stone fire pit alone. Her seltzer was untouched. Her face hadn't crumbled, but it had dropped. The way a heavy curtain falls when the rod snaps. She had heard something. She didn't need to hear Colton's specific words. She had felt the vibration of their laughter, and she knew she was the punchline. She turned to me, her eyes glassy. "Honey," she whispered, "I think I'd like to go wait in the car now." I reached out and took her arm firmly, not to lead her away, but to steady her. "Don't go yet, Mom," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "I already have a plan." She looked at me for a long time. She didn't ask what the plan was, and that was the part that broke my heart, her total, silent reliance on me to fix this. I walked her back into the house, my hand on the small of her back. She walked tall, unhurried, the way she always did. She touched the wedding ring on the chain around her neck once, a gesture she only does when she's calling on my father's memory for strength. "Eliza, there you are," Rosalind called out. "We're sitting down for dinner." 28 guests were seated at a massive mahogany table. My mother and I were placed right next to Chloe, directly across from the Sterling parents. Colton sat just a few seats down. Whitfield Sr. stood up to give a toast. "To our two families," he announced, raising a crystal flute. "Welcome to the home you'll be visiting often. May our properties and our interests grow together for many years to come." The table clapped politely. My mother's face was like stone. I noticed 3 things about that toast. He had used the word properties instead of lives. He had looked directly at a large aerial photograph of local farmland hanging on the wall when he said grow together. And he had phrased the word families like it was a legal term he was trying to define. The proof of his greed wasn't in the toast, though. It was in my trunk. It was in the LLC filings I had pulled weeks ago. Chloe's eyes met mine across the table. She held my gaze for several seconds, her lower lip trembling just enough for me to see. She didn't know the full legal nightmare yet, but her gut was telling her she was in danger. The dinner finally dragged to an end around 10:15 p.m. As we were walking toward the valet, my phone buzzed in my hand. It was a text from Chloe. 3 words, "We need talk." I told Mom to wait in the passenger seat of the Ford and walked around to the side of the driveway where the catering vans were parked, hidden from the valets. Chloe appeared minutes later, clutching her heels in her hands, her feet bare on the gravel. "Maya," she breathed, her voice cracking. "I don't think Colton loves me. I think he's using me for something else. I've been finding weird receipts in his office." "I know," I said flatly. "I've known for 6 months. I didn't tell you because I needed to make sure he didn't panic and hide his tracks." She stared at me, her mouth hanging open. 6 months? Maya, what did you find?" I told her everything. I told her about the Shell LLCs, the title records, and the questions Colton asked Mom at Thanksgiving about the access roads. I told her about the photo of his father with the corrupt county commissioner. As I spoke, the hurt on Chloe's face evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. "Maya," she said, her voice sounding like ice, "I want to go through with it. I want to walk down that aisle." "What?" I asked, shocked. "I want him at the altar. I want his parents in the front row. I want 200 of their elite friends to be witnesses when his life falls apart." I blinked at my soft little sister. "That's a lot of risk, Chloe." "That's the point," she said, looking toward the car where our mother sat waiting. The woman with the calloused hands and the iron jacket who had just been humiliated. "I'm a paralegal, Maya. I know how to document a crime. Let's finish this." The drive back to the farm was quiet. Mom didn't ask why I'd been talking to Chloe behind a van. She just watched the moonlit cornfields pass by. "Mom," I said after a while, "I'd rather lose the farm than let people like that into our family." She turned her head. "Is that what you were thinking at dinner? I heard you mumble something like that earlier." "Mom, I'm not just doing this for us," I said, gripping the steering wheel. "I'm doing this because they're trying to steal the land Dad left us." She went silent for a long time as we passed the old silos and the dairy farms that marked the border of our property. "What do you mean, steal?" she finally asked. "I'll explain it all when the final pieces are in place. But I need you to do something hard. I need you to smile at the bridal shower. I need you to act like everything is fine at the rehearsal. Do not say a word about tonight to anyone, especially not Colton." She nodded once. "I trust you, Maya." That trust was built over decades in our kitchen. From her braiding my hair to her holding my hand for 4 hours straight at my father's funeral. "Honey," she said as we turned onto our gravel driveway, "your father would have been so proud of the woman you've become tonight." I didn't let myself cry. There was too much work to do. By morning, she would understand the scale of the war we were in. Saturday morning, 6:30 a.m. I was at my kitchen table with a massive mug of coffee and a legal file open. My father, Lucas Avery, died in March of 2014. He was only 56. He left Mom 47 acres of prime working farmland that had been in our family since 1948. Mom's entire life was that farm. She made about $58,000 a year from it, mostly from a community-supported agriculture program and her famous maple syrup. She lived simply, her mortgage was gone, and she loved every inch of that dirt. I opened the folder to the printout from the Bureau of Land Records. An LLC called Heritage Acres Holdings had filed a notice of interest on the property directly touching our eastern fence line. The parent company, Sterling Development Group. I knew exactly what was happening. In January, the Department of Transportation always announces its new highway expansion plans. I suspected the new I-78 extension was slated to go right through our area. If Colton married Chloe, he'd have a legal foot in the door to manage our property. Chloe came over on Sunday afternoon with sandwiches and her laptop. We sat at the table, and I laid out the mission. "I need 4 things," I told her. 1, internal planning documents for the highway extension. 2, any memo proving the Sterlings knew about the route before it was public. 3, the voting records of Commissioner Mallister. And 4, the prenuptial agreement Colton's lawyers are going to send you. Chloe didn't hesitate. She wrote them down. "I can get the prenup when it arrives, and I can get the memos. Colton is arrogant and leaves printouts on his desk. He doesn't trust the cloud. He thinks he's being old school and safe." I looked at her. "How long have you really been suspicious?" "About 8 weeks, she admitted. "He asked me to sign a power of attorney so he could help with my legal matters. I told him I wanted you to look at it, and he got angry. He said he didn't want lawyers interfering in our marriage. Then he started asking about Mom's will, specifically if the farm passed to us directly or stayed in an estate. He called it estate planning. It was an inventory check." "Okay," I said, leaning in. "Code phrase, if I text you how's the centerpiece." That means check his desk that night. Use your phone, date stamps on, geotagging on. Chloe pulled out her phone and slid it across the table. "Maya, I've already started." There were 14 photos. The first was a folder on Colton's desk. The label read, "Target Parcels." I scrolled to the next one. It was an aerial map of our farm. Our 47 acres were outlined in thick red marker. In the corner, in Colton's handwriting, it read, $3,200 per acre, total acquisition. The first time I saw the number, I thought it was a typo. The second time I read it, I felt a wave of nausea. The third time, I realized I was looking at the headline of a federal indictment. $8.4 million. That was the projected net profit from flipping my mother's back 47 acres. I was staring at a photo Chloe had snagged from Colton's desk, a printed email from Colton to his father, Whitfield Sr., sent 3 months ago. The subject line was cold. "Update, Project Greenlight on track." The body of the email read, "She's hooked. The mother is buying the local family act. Should be locked in by June." She was my sister, Chloe. Locked in meant a marriage, a predatory prenup, and a forced property transfer. My stomach turned. To them, my mother's life's work was just a down-home angle to be exploited by Rosalind's fake Southern hospitality. Chloe's hand was trembling as she showed me the phone. "I feel like I'm going to be sick," she whispered. "Don't," I said, my voice like iron. "You keep going to those dinners. You laugh at his pathetic jokes. We don't just have a motive now, we have a paper trail. But we need one more thing, a witness that actually carries weight." Chloe looked at me confused. Who, Mom? No, I said. The FBI. I'd gone to law school with a woman named Maya Caldwell. While I went into private practice to help farmers, she went to the Philadelphia field office, specializing in public corruption. I reached out to her that night. Chloe sat there for a long time, staring at the ceiling of my kitchen. How much longer do I have to pretend to love a monster? 8 months, I told her. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and stood up. She washed her hands at the sink, dried them slowly, and turned around with a look I'd never seen before. I have a plan, Maya, she said. I want this to end at the altar. Fast forward to late July. It was a Saturday morning, 91 degrees, and the Pennsylvania humidity was thick enough to chew. I was out at the farm helping Mom with the mid-season inventory, checking the maple lines and replacing any cracked taps. She came out of the house in her old work boots and a faded t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. Honey, she said, holding her clipboard tight, come look at the fence line. We walked out past the vegetable garden and the 2 fishing ponds to the rusted gate where my dad used to sit with his coffee every summer morning. The eastern fence line bordered the back 47, the land my parents had literally starved themselves to save for back in the early 90s. Tied to the fence were 3 bright orange survey ribbons. They were fluttering in the hot breeze, attached to wooden stakes driven into our dirt. Each ribbon had a code spray-painted on it, .pre-SURV. Mom looked at me, her face pale. I never gave anyone permission to survey this land, Maya. Did the county call you? No, I said, already pulling out my phone. I took high-res photos of every stake, logged the GPS coordinates, and noted the timestamp. I added them to the folder in my head and the one in my trunk. I called the county commissioner's office on the drive home. The secretary picked up and played it off like it was no big deal. Oh, that was just a courtesy survey for the state. Commissioner Mallister approved it last month. Approved a survey on private property without owner consent? I asked. My blood was boiling. That's not a courtesy. That's criminal trespass. That was the moment this stopped being a family feud and started being a federal case. You don't put stakes in a widow's dirt without an invitation. The following Saturday at 7 a.m., I met Maya Caldwell at a greasy spoon diner in Pottstown. We'd done every major law school clinic together back in 2014. She was a bulldog in the courtroom, and I knew she'd appreciate the gift I was about to give her. I slid the folder across the laminate table. She didn't say a word for 15 minutes. Her Western omelet sat there getting cold while she flipped through the pages. When she hit the email about Chloe being hooked, she stopped chewing her toast. Maya, she said, her eyes narrowing, this is wire fraud. I know, I replied. The emails cross state lines, and the LLC structure proves criminal intent. If we can prove Commissioner Mallister has insider info on an unannounced highway project, we're looking at federal public corruption too. Maya closed the folder. I need 3 more pieces of the puzzle before I can open an official file. 1. Mallister's voting record on the I-78 corridor. 2. The actual physical prenup. 3. I need one of the Sterlings to confirm the scheme in writing or on a recording. We'll have all 3 by November, I promised. That's a big swing, she said. How can you be so sure? My sister is on the inside. Maya took a long sip of her coffee. How old is she? Is she up for this? She's 27. She's a paralegal with 5 years under her belt. She's one of us. Maya nodded slowly. I'll open a preliminary file on Monday. Don't tell your mother. Don't tell anyone. If you bring me a smoking gun before that wedding, I'll have the arrest warrants ready for the reception. I didn't smile. I just nodded. The war was officially on. In late August, Chloe went up to the Sterlings' private lake cabin in the Poconos for the weekend. On Friday afternoon, I got a text. Big Whitfield just pulled in. Something's up. Later that night, Chloe was out on the back deck when she heard shouting coming from the study. The windows were open, and the men weren't being quiet. They were arguing about a January deadline. She waited until they went down to the dock to smoke cigars, then she made her move. The office desk was locked, but the key was sitting right in a pencil cup, Classic old money arrogance. They never think anyone will actually challenge them. She slid the drawer open and found a manila folder 3 inches thick labeled I-78E extension / phase 2. She photographed all 17 pages, every single one. She put everything back exactly as she found it and was back on the deck before they finished their first cigar. On Sunday night, I sat at my kitchen table and printed the files from the cloud. It was a total roadmap of their crime. Page 1 was a confidential dot memo. Page 2 was a draft purchase agreement for our farm at a measly $3,200 an acre. Pages 3 through 15 were the draft of the prenup they hadn't shown Chloe yet. But page 17, that was the nail in the coffin. It was a sheet of yellow legal pad with Whitfield Sr.'s handwriting. Earl gets 15%. I sat there for an hour in total silence. That one sentence was a one-way ticket to federal prison. I met Maya at her Philly office the next Tuesday. I brought the photos, the title records, and Mallister's voting history. He voted yes on every single Sterling project for 3 years, 22 votes, 0 recusals, despite being Whitfield Sr.'s first cousin. Maya tapped the stack of papers against the table. This is it, Maya. Wire fraud, conspiracy, bribery of a public official. The handwritten note is the kill shot. How do you want to play this? The wedding is December 14th, I said, leaning back. 200 guests. All 3 Sterlings in one room, my sister at the altar. I want you there as her +1. I want the sheriff in the back room. And I want Mallister picked up at his house in Reading at the exact same time. You're looking for maximum damage, Maya noted. I want the truth to blow up in the very room where they plan to bury it. She didn't hesitate. I'm in, I'll be there. I drove home that night and finally broke down. I cried for the first time in months, not because I was sad, but because the air finally felt clean. There were 97 days left. I still needed 2 things, the signed prenup and a video of the commissioner lying to my face. The bridal shower was in September at the Sterling estate. 60 women, pink champagne, and Rosalind acting like she was the Queen of England. My mom wore a simple navy dress and her Sunday pearls. She looked beautiful. Rosalind met us at the patio with a fake smile. Eliza, you look so refreshed. We heard you were a farmer, so we were expecting, well, you know. The guests laughed. My mom didn't blink. I'm still a farmer, she said. I just changed my shoes. The laughter stopped instantly. One woman in the back, a lady named B who I actually liked, gave Mom a genuine, respectful nod. I steered Mom toward the buffet. For 2 hours, she was the most elegant person in the room, explaining the science of maple evaporation to bridesmaids who were actually fascinated. Meanwhile, Chloe slipped me her phone in the upstairs bathroom. She'd found a guest list on Rosalind's desk. Next to my mother's name, Rosalind had scribbled 2 words. We're modest. Save it, I told my sister. We'll put it on the big screen at the wedding. In October, I set up a meeting with Commissioner Mallister. I used a fake excuse about a client's easement. We sat in his office, surrounded by photos of his grandkids. And I played the dumb lawyer, role to perfection. Earl, off the record, are there any rumors about the I-78 expansion? I asked casually. My clients are worried. He didn't even flinch. No, nothing on the books. The state is being very quiet. He lied through his teeth. He said it too fast, too smooth. Then he had the nerve to ask how Chloe's wedding prep was going. I just smiled and walked out. The lobby of that public building had high-def security cameras with audio. He'd just lied to a federal investigation witness on government property. I sent the timestamp to Maya immediately. Add it to the file, she replied. The final trap was set on October 22nd. The prenup arrived at Chloe's place via FedEx. She brought it straight to my office. Section 4.2 was the smoking gun. It stated that within 90 days of the wedding, Chloe had to transfer any interest in familial land to an LLC controlled 51% by Colton. In other words, if Mom died, Colton would own the farm within 3 months. Don't sign it, I warned her. I told him I'd sign it at the altar, Chloe said, her eyes cold. I told him it was a gesture of ultimate trust. He loved the idea. He's going to have his lawyer keep it in his tuxedo pocket until the ceremony. I stared at her. Chloe, do you realize what you've done? He's going to walk down the aisle carrying the very document that's going to ruin him. Good, she said and walked back to her desk. The clock was at 53 days. Pause for a second. If you're listening to this while you're doing chores or driving, do me a favor. Give your mom a call today. And if anyone has ever tried to make your family feel less than, drop a mom in the comments below. I'm reading every single one of them. Now, let's get to the final stretch. The last weekend in November, Mom showed up at my house, shaking. Maya, I can't do it. I can't watch her marry him. I'm going to snap. I want to call it off tonight. I sat her down and poured her a coffee. It was time. I laid out all 17 pages. The photos, the bribery note, the arrest warrants. She read it all twice. He really said I belong in a trailer park, she asked quietly. He did. She set the folder down and looked at me with a fire in her eyes I hadn't seen since my father was alive. Your father bought that land in 1991 for $1,100 an acre, she said, her voice steady and low. We ate beans for 2 years to keep it. They will never have it. She stood up, straightened her back, and looked at her reflection in the dark kitchen window. I'll smile at that wedding. I'll wear the pearls. And when you tell me to look at the back of the church, I'll be ready. I gripped my coffee mug. Mom, do you know what happens when you look at the back? Mom reached up and touched the gold chain around her neck, her thumb tracing the smooth band of my father's wedding ring. That back corner of the church. That's where your dad's family always sat for Sunday service, she whispered. I'll know he's right there with us. I broke down then. It wasn't a loud, sobbing cry. It was that quiet, heavy release that happens when you realize your mother didn't need to be told the plan. She was the plan. She had been holding us together for decades, and now it was my turn to hold the line for her. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Her palm was rough with calluses from years of honest labor. Mine was smooth from turning pages in a law library. We sat there in total silence for 2 minutes, just breathing. What time do you need me ready on the 14th? She finally asked. 12:30 sharp. I'll be in the driveway, be on the porch. I'll be on the porch, she promised. The countdown was on. 8 days, 200 high society guests, 3 Sterlings, 1 corrupt commissioner, and 1 altar that was about to become a crime scene. The rehearsal dinner was Friday night at the Sterling estate. 40 people, hand-calligraphed seating charts, lobster tail, and a 6-year champagne tower that probably cost more than my car. Before dessert, Colton stood up to give a toast. He was already 2 stiff drinks in, looking smugger than ever. To my gorgeous bride and her charming family, he said, pausing with a smirk. We are so thrilled to finally fold them into our portfolio. He caught himself quickly. I mean our family. A ripple of polite laughter went around the table. Whitfield Sr. tried to hide a knowing grin behind his water glass. Rosalind reached over and squeezed his forearm, that classic, be subtle gesture wives use when their husbands are being too loud about their greed. Chloe leaned in and kissed Colton's cheek. Her eyes met mine across the room. They weren't filled with anger or tears. They were steady. She looked like a woman who had memorized the exits. I drove home at 10 p.m. Mom had left early, taking her own truck back to the farm. On the way, I slowed down as I passed the eastern edge of our property. I flipped my high beams toward the back 47. There were 6 orange ribbons now. In July, there had been 3. Now, 3 of those stakes were driven directly into our actual pasture, 5 feet inside our fence line. Intentional trespass. I pulled over on the shoulder of Cedar Hollow Road, ruined my dress shoes walking into the damp field, and photographed every single stake. I logged the coordinates and sent the folder to Maya at 11:47 p.m. Her reply came 6 minutes later. We have everything. Warrants are signed. Earl gets picked up at 1:55 p.m. tomorrow. We move on the church at 2:00. I slept 4 hours. At 5:47 a.m. my phone buzzed. It was Maya. Sheriff Holland is a go. It's game time. By 6 a.m., I was at my kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and a final checklist. Maya Caldwell, arriving at 1:15 p.m. as Chloe's college friend. Sheriff Holland, unmarked car half a mile away, entering through the back vestry at 2:00 p.m. on the signal. Earl Mallister, being intercepted by the FBI at his home 5 minutes before the organ starts. The evidence: Chloe was wearing a wire hidden in her bodice. She had the predatory prenup tucked into a velvet sleeve inside her bridal bouquet bag. The folder: I had my manila folder in a tote bag. It was a backup, but mostly it was symbolic. I'd touched those papers every night for 6 months. I wasn't leaving them behind. At 12:30, I pulled into the farm. Mom was standing on the porch. She wore her pearls, the chain around her neck, and a long wool coat over her navy dress. She looked like royalty. I held the door open for her, and we drove to the church. St. Andrew's Episcopal sits on a hill, old stone, vaulted ceilings, and a sanctuary that holds over 200 people. I parked at 1:10 p.m. The air smelled like beeswax and pine. The string quartet was tuning their instruments. Whitfield Sr. and Rosalind were already in the front pew, draped in diamonds and cashmere. Whitfield kept checking his phone, frowning. He was waiting for a text from Earl, a text that was never going to come. Maya was in pew 12, looking like any other wedding guest in a navy cocktail dress. She gave me a tiny, imperceptible nod. I kissed Mom's cheek and went back to the bridal suite. Chloe was in her dress, ivory silk, simple and stunning. She looked at me in the mirror. "He gave me the prenup this morning," she whispered. "He told me to sign it right after the vows. It's in the bouquet bag." "And the wire." Maya tested it from the parking lot. "We're live." I gripped her shoulders. "Chloe, I am so proud of you." She didn't cry, and neither did I. We had a job to do. At 1:58 p.m., Colton took his place at the altar. He straightened his silk tie and smiled at the priest. He had no idea that 2 minutes ago, his father's cousin Earl had been led out of his house in handcuffs. The organ swelled at exactly 2:00 p.m. Chloe walked down the aisle alone. After our dad died, she'd promised she'd never let another man give her away. She kept that promise. She walked slow and steady, her thumb resting on the velvet portfolio hidden in her flowers. Mom and I stood in the front pew. Mom's hand was on her necklace, her thumb tracing the ring. Once, twice, 3 times. Chloe reached the altar and took Colton's hand. He looked smug, like a man who had just closed the biggest deal of his life. The priest began the traditional reading. "Love is patient, love is kind." Then came the heavy words. "If anyone here present knows any reason why these two should not be lawfully joined, let them speak now or forever hold their peace." The silence lasted 2 seconds, 3, 4. Chloe turned. She didn't turn to look at Colton. She turned to face the entire congregation. 200 people stared back. Cell phones started coming out. Colton's smile faltered. "Chloe," he whispered. She didn't look at him. "Before I say I do," she said, her voice projecting through the church's PA system via her wire. "I have something to share with everyone in this room." Whitfield Sr. started to stand up. Maya stood up in pew 12. Chloe took a manila folder from her maid of honor. "On October 22nd, Chloe's voice rang out, "my fiancé's lawyers sent me a prenuptial agreement. Section 4.2 requires me to sign over my family's land to an LLC controlled by Colton Sterling within 90 days of this wedding." A murmur rippled through the pews like a cold wind. Colton reached for her arm, but Chloe stepped back. "On August 19th, she continued, "I found documents proving that Sterling Development intended to buy my mother's farm for pennies and flip it to the state for the I-78 highway expansion, a project that hasn't even been made public yet." The church went dead silent. The projected profit was $8.4 million. Gasps filled the room. Chloe pulled a single sheet of yellow legal paper from the folder. "And this is a note in Whitfield Sterling Sr.'s handwriting. It says, 'Earl gets 15%. Earl is County Commissioner Earl Mallister." She looked at her watch. At 1:55 p.m. today, the FBI arrested Commissioner Mallister. He's been in federal custody for exactly 7 minutes. Colton's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Chloe set the paper on the altar rail and looked at the priest. "Father, I'm sorry. There won't be a wedding today. I needed 200 witnesses to make sure this truth was never buried." Whitfield Sr. lunged for the folder, but he didn't make it 3 steps. Maya stepped into the center aisle. "Whitfield Sterling Sr., I'm Special Agent Maya Caldwell with the FBI. I have a warrant for your arrest for wire fraud, conspiracy, and bribery of a public official." "This is a wedding," Whitfield screamed, his face turning the color of a brick. "You can't do this." "I can, sir." The vestry door swung open. Sheriff Holland stepped out in full uniform with 2 deputies. They walked Whitfield Sr. to the side aisle and put him in cuffs against the stone wall. Maya turned to Colton. "Colton Sterling, you are also under arrest for conspiracy and wire fraud. You have the right to remain silent." Colton looked at his mother, his face crumbling. Mom, do something." Rosalind Sterling just sat there. She looked at her son, the son she'd spent 31 years protecting, and she didn't say a word. She knew the game was over. Sheriff Holland approached her quietly. "Ma'am, you're a person of interest. We'll need you to come with us." Rosalind stood up, her mascara running. As she was being led toward the door, she had to pass our pew. She stopped in front of my mother. "Eliza," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "Please, tell them this is a misunderstanding." Mom didn't move. She didn't speak. She just looked at Rosalind with those calloused hands folded in front of her. I stepped forward. "My mother belongs anywhere she chooses to be," I said, my voice echoing off the stone walls. "You're the one being escorted out." The church went still. Rosalind blinked, her mouth trembling, before the deputy led her away. I looked at Mom. She looked at me, her eyes dry and fierce. She said one word: "Honey." That was it. That 5-second sentence was worth every night of work for the last 6 months. The church emptied. The Sterlings were led out the side doors in cuffs. As Colton passed us, he hissed something under his breath, but Chloe didn't even flinch. We walked out together, Mom, Chloe, and me. The December sun was cold and bright. Maya met us at the car. "Earl is already talking to lawyers," she said. "The Sterlings are headed to the federal field office. Thank you, girls. That was a master class." Chloe was still in her wedding dress, leaning against the Ford Escape, staring at the sky. She had walked herself down that aisle, and she had walked herself back out. We drove 47 miles back to the farm. The car smelled like expensive silk and the coffee I'd had at dawn. Mom rolled down the window and took a deep breath of the cold winter air. "He's not getting the back 47, she said. It wasn't a question. It was a fact. "I'm starving," Chloe said from the back seat. "Can we hit the diner?" I laughed, the first real laugh I'd had in weeks. "Yeah, let's go." We stopped at Hilda's diner. Chloe walked in still wearing her Vera Wang gown. The hostess didn't even ask questions. "Booth or table?" Hilda herself came out and set down 3 plates of pancakes. She didn't even bring a check. She just kissed Mom on the head. The news had already hit the local stations. That was the moment I finally let the tears fall. By February, the grand jury returned indictments on 8 federal counts. Whitfield Sr. was convicted and got 14 years. Colton took a plea deal and got 11. Earl Mallister got 6 and a lifetime ban from office. Rosalind was never charged, but she was blacklisted from every charity board in the state. She moved to Florida by spring. The Department of Transportation redrew the highway route 3 miles north. Mom's farm was safe. Chloe quit her old life and came to work at my firm. She aced the LSAT and started law school the following year. One Saturday in April, Mom went out to the back 47. She pulled up every orange steak and every ribbon, wrapped them in a bundle, and burned them in the wood stove. By the time the snow melted, those ribbons were ash, and Mom was planting tomatoes in that same dirt. One Sunday in May, we all sat at the kitchen table. The sun was coming through the window, and Mom looked at us both. "Your dad would be proud of all of us," she said, "but mostly Chloe. She did the brave part." Here, what I learned. If someone looks at the person who raised you and thinks they can walk all over them because of where they're from, you don't have to shout. You just stay quiet. You build the file. And you let the truth speak in the loudest room they own. That's my story. If your mom is your hero, go tell her tonight. If you loved this justice, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe to Real Reddit Revenge, and I'll see you in the next one.